One of the core things that you guys are building at Composable is obviously Centauri, right? Which was announced a couple of weeks ago that you guys are now in the testnet. And there's a couple of launch partners basically that are testing this implementation. Can you explain maybe for the audience that does not know what Centauri is? Basically, it's an expansion to IBC, but can you explain what exactly that means and what it unlocks?
Yeah, this isn't really like a new topic. So I think a long time ago, Aki and the original sort of thought leaders around IBC who wrote the initial IBC spec, Christopher Woes as well, they always believed that IBC would scale beyond the Cosmos ecosystem, but nothing actually was built to let different chains with different stacks be able to utilize IBC. And so we came along and said, okay, for us, like everything stems from abstraction. I think Say is basically hyper focused on what is the best experience for traders. And for us, I think taking it a step back and saying, what is the best experience for just users? Like literally just like giving an application to your grandma and then basically moving forward from there. I know it sounds funny, but that's really like how we think about things. What is the most optimal user experience for people to own their own money? And the answer to that is basically abstraction. And how you bring about abstraction is by getting best execution on as many different chains as physically possible. So what that means is bridging is actually important because this helps you aggregate market. If we didn't have something like DTCC in TradFi land, we wouldn't be able to aggregate all the different markets that are executing your equity swaps, for instance. So when we tried to identify how do you get all these different ecosystems to talk to each other, IBC was really the only answer. We've seen bastardizations of IBC from layer 0. We've seen people set up trusted multi-sigs with a bunch of validators. We've seen routing protocols. We've seen optimistic bridging. And honestly, like when everyone really asks themselves, in 5 years from now, is any of this stuff going to actually be around? I think the answer that no one wants to actually admit to themselves is probably not, especially if like larger players are coming into the space. Nobody wants to use a bridge that has either A, rugged in the past, or B, has a attack vector of getting rugged. I think at this point, IBC's trust assumption of honest majority is not one that should be hand waved away, but one that is at least more livable than, oh, I just trust these two entities who are going to sign transactions for me and custody my funds at one point. So we then said, okay, how do we make IBC agnostic and this chain agnostic? And this involved then, and I'll pass it to Blas, our bridging guru, who can explain a lot more about how we actually did this. But essentially, IBC from the get-go only supported really Cosmos SDK chains. So we had to allow for, so all the different pieces of the stack needed to get redone. And actually so that's everything from light clients, that's everything from how do you interpret IBC on a Rust base, that's the relayers in the ecosystem, I could pretty much just go on and on. Changing the actual IBC Go repository itself, making light clients available to be called by the IBC Go repo that are not necessarily just Tendermint light clients. This took us basically a year to get to this point because this was a lot of work. And actually there was a article put out by Informal talking about how they're changing their Hermes relayer to adapt to the relayer that we've built. So you really had to go into all of these core protocols and make them work for other ecosystems. And so when we call it like Centauri, the only reason why we call this implementation of IBC or this extension of IBC a whole other name is because I still think to this day, people assume IBC is just Cosmos to Cosmos until people actually feel like see the reality, which is Cosmos to Ethereum or Cosmos to Polkadot or Cosmos to Near is actually possible. Then I think like, you know, there's going to be this kind of divergence in how people refer to the Cosmos ecosystem, right? Is the Cosmos ecosystem IBC or is the Cosmos ecosystem Cosmos SDK chains? And so like we just added a name to this just to say, okay, this is cross ecosystem IBC, to make it more clear that, look, we didn't just slap some Go code into a Rust shim and just launch it. Like, no, this required us having to coordinate with 5 different core teams in the Cosmos ecosystem to actually get this over the line. And we had to basically start from complete scratch. So now I'm super excited to show the world and work with different teams on actually getting them wired up to these different ecosystems and starting to have these types of use cases that I've just mentioned before, like trading on Say, but as a Polkadot user, or even just bridging DOT assets over. There really isn't much DeFi activity with DOT, and it's a large asset, like lots of different holders, lots of TVL. Imagine that liquidity could flow into Osmosis and Say and DYDX and all these other ecosystems. That's just going to change the game, and also vice versa, right? Imagine assets from these chains flow into Hama and Near and Ethereum. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how this actually evolves and the sort of socio-cultural implications of this as well.